Hey Nancy Drew fans, we're back for book 18, The Mystery of the Moss-Covered Mansion. Originally published in 1941 and revised in 1971, the revised edition is essentially a completely new story under the same title. In the original, Nancy, Bess, and George are tracking down a missing heiress when they discover the mysterious moss-covered mansion. The rewrite is a much more elaborate plot. Carson Drew has a client in Florida who's been wrongly accused of taking explosive oranges into the Kennedy Space Center. So he, housekeeper Hannah, and Nancy, Bess, and George all go to Florida to try to prove the client's innocence. For the first 73 pages, Nancy refers to this as the mystery of the explosive oranges, and it's not until chapter 9, titled Jungle Threat, that the mansion comes into play. Conveniently, the Nickersons also own property in the area, so Ned, Dave, and Bert all come down to help out. While sightseeing, they have this great exchange. George, who had been silent for several minutes, said, "I'd like to be an astronaut. What do you think my chances are?" "Oh no," Bess exclaimed. "Suppose you went to the moon and got stranded there." Smiling, Nancy remarked that she too would like to become an astronaut. Ned grinned and said, "How about letting us boys go first? We'll tell you how it is." This exchange is one of several educational moments. While the gang's in Florida, we also learn about all the different kinds of oranges, what happened to the Aztec Indians, a tree called the sausage tree, and during the climax of the book, Ned gets to share his knowledge on parabolic reflector antenna. The story again features some seriously random moments of danger. Nancy almost gets hit by a basket of falling oranges, the leopard escapes twice, Mr. Drew's plane crash lands on its way in from New York City, Nancy and Ned are imprisoned in the basement of the moss-covered mansion and left dangling next to a boiling pit of water, and the entire gang gets tear-gassed by a couple of fake photographers. Lucky for Nancy, at different times, both Bess and George step in to save the day. "Stop that!" George yelled at Anton. She grabbed his arm, and as Nancy staggered away, George buckled the man's knees and flipped him over her shoulder. He fell to the floor with a crash. And when the leopard gets loose, Bess shows some surprisingly quick thinking. She jumped out and said excitedly, "I brought some meat with a tranquilizer in it." "You what?" George asked. Bess explained that she'd noticed a doctor sign on the house on the next block. She'd driven over there and explained what was happening. "Bess, you're the heroine of the occasion," George told her cousin. She grinned. "And you know I don't say that often." But this is a pretty good mix of plenty of excitement and some typical Nancy moments. In my favorite scene, Mr. Billingsley's orange grove is just caught on fire and all the men are just standing around waiting for the fire trucks to arrive. Nancy stops one of the pickers and asks what she can do to help. "You're a girl. What can you do?" Nancy ignores him and proceeds to, with the help of Bess and George, put out the fire on all the trees before the fire truck gets there. This scene is reminiscent of one of my favorite stories about Harriet Stratemeyer. She's the owner of the syndicate, and Nancy Drew had always been one of her favorites, and by the 1970s she was doing a lot of the writing for the series. When she was in college at Wellesley in 1912, there was a fire in one of the old buildings on campus that housed all the student records and a bunch of antiques. Harriet was one of the girls organizing the rescue of all the treasures and actually went into the burning building, later getting a Medal of Honor for her bravery. Press coverage from one of the witnesses sounds an awful lot like the praise that Nancy Drew often gets. "This heroine has not been and cannot be excelled," he told his interviewer, "for they were calm, determined, and unafraid, and chatted in quiet tones as they worked in the cold, damp morning, performing feats that would be tests for young men of their years." Next up, the quest of the missing map.